Yeah, so tell us some of the things that drive a person investing and maybe drive them the wrong way, that aren't rational, traditional investment.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily our fault, Kevin. It's how we've adapted over generations. We're just not wired to be good investors. And much like, there's a lot of talk these days about how that we're not really probably wired physically for the 21st century, where we have jobs that we don't necessarily have a lot of work effort. Food is readily available. As a result of that, we're dealing with issues like obesity and such. Whereas our ancestors didn't necessarily have those problems. The scarcity of food and hard labor and such precluded them from that. Likewise, I believe that because of what's been passed down from generations, we're to some extent fighting the last battle that our ancestors fought. And so as a result of it, our herding instinct, our survival instinct is so very, very strong that it really doesn't necessarily apply to the world in which we live today.
So what I hear you saying, for example, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when there wasn't abundant food, you couldn't go to the local 7-Eleven or fast food restaurants. When you found food, you ate it, and you would store it because you needed it. But we find food every day. We find food at breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so our bodies would be geared to store that food if we needed. But now, with the abundance of food, similarly,
and then combine that with our sedentary lifestyles.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and so likewise, think about our ancestors. Our ancestors, generations, decades, centuries, millennia before us, they dealt with life and death decisions every single day. If they made a bad decision, the consequence could be death. When you're dealing with saber-toothed tigers or woolly mammoths, or trying to save up food for the winter, or the evil tribe next door,
or just living on the prairie. I mean,
yeah. And we've seen that life expectancies have almost tripled over the past 1,000 years. But we still have many of the habits are ingrained such that we think that every day that we're making life and death kind of decisions. As a result of that, we've become very short-term oriented in terms of how we look at things, and we'll herd into investments that are doing well, and we'll flee because of our survival instinct from things that are going wrong. And yet that's probably the exact opposite of what we should be doing.
So a good example of that. I mean, we were working together at Templeton at the time. I remember we were in Carmel, and I remember going across the street and getting my hair cut. And the lady cutting my hair said, "Where do you work?" And I said, "I work for an investment manager." And she said, "Oh, that's great. And what was your performance last year?" I said, "Oh, we had a great year. I think we were up 15, 16% performance." And she looked at me and she said, "Last year?" I said, "Yeah, last year. I got more than that yesterday. What's wrong with you? We're in this internet economy." And she'd bought Pets.com and all these internet-based stocks. And so she was herding in, like you're talking about, and thinking, I'm a genius. And, it didn't end so well for her, did it?
Yeah, and that pattern just happens over and over and over again. The euphoria of the internet stocks, of the housing bubble, of the Bitcoin bubble, of the gold bubble, of the oil bubble. It's the way we operate as humans, because we see and we extrapolate out what's happened in behavioral finance. It's called a recency bias. We'll extrapolate that out into the future.